one. And I know that I'm setting myself up for probably disappointment later tonight. But I hope you were with us last week on the Final Five, because we almost swept the board. We had 2 out of 3 on the power play points with Reinhart and Matthews. We hit the goal scorer line A. We hit the side with Washington. We hit the total with the over in Toronto and Buffalo. So we had a really good Final Five last week. And I'm hoping that we can now ride that wave.
Only on SportsGrid.
50 points in a fourth quarter for the Atlanta Hawks. Like, what is going on? It's like circus numbers. What are we doing?
And we sound like two old heads complaining. It's a tough watch. It's a tough watch sometimes. I don't mind the shooting. I just know the numbers. Like, when you strictly look at it from the numbers in betting, it's getting really hard to bet.
Game Time Decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
Louis Riddick has interviewed for every job in North America. And I'm not just talking football. I'm talking about every business in North America of any kind whatsoever. Tire companies, grocery store CEOs, shopping malls, insurance companies. What job hasn't Louis Riddick interviewed for?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
The NBA will take center stage once football stops, and people will watch the NBA playoffs and all that. But the standings are whacked out in the Western Conference. Like, Oklahoma City, Memphis, and the Houston Rockets are the best teams in the conference.
You want to talk about a team with overs and no defense? The Wizards are your team. It's unbelievable. They can't make a total high enough. It's nuts.
Sports Rage tonight. Weeknights 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome and a very happy Friday to you. It is Game Time Decisions here on the Sports Grid Network. I'm Joe Raineri, and are you ready for some football? Because we got plenty of it coming up on this weekend. I'm looking forward to it, as Wild Card Weekend is almost upon us in the NFL, and we've got a lot of very interesting line movement happening in those games coming up. It all begins, of course, tomorrow afternoon, 4:30 Eastern time, as the Chargers will be in Houston taking on the Texans. That, of course, will kick off Wild Card Weekend. We're starting to see, again, a steady flow of Charger money come into the marketplace here, telling us that, -3, we're probably lucky if it stays that. Might get even a little bit higher, but there is a clear line that has been drawn in the sand between the pros and the Joes. The public loves the Chargers. The pros, not so much. The pros are on the Houston Texans, so a lot to go over in that game. And then, of course, tomorrow night, a lot of people still having a very difficult time trying to come to the realization that, yes, the Pittsburgh Steelers might not exactly be what they once were. Ben Roethlisberger not walking in through that door anytime soon, which is why we continue to see the Pittsburgh Steelers as a 9.5-point dog taking on the Ravens tomorrow night. That total, again, hovering now around 43.5. That is down at least 3.5 points from that opening of 46.5 here. So it does appear that tomorrow's Wild Card Weekend to kick off, there are clear signs and a clear line in the sand that is being drawn here between the public and what the pros are looking at. Now, to give the public their due, it has been one of the chalkiest, most favorite winning NFL seasons we have seen in a very, very long time. The public has absolutely dominated this NFL season, but will the dogs start to bark finally in Wild Card Weekend? That is what we are going to find out, and it's going to start tomorrow in that Chargers and Houston game for sure. We also have, of course, a huge college basketball slate heading into this weekend. We do have, of course, a couple of games here tonight, which I think are going to be of some interest to folks, as UCLA, number 22 in the country, heading out to Maryland. That's coming up 8 o'clock here tonight. Now, the big story in this one is how Mick Cronin, the UCLA head coach, after an absolute embarrassing beatdown by Michigan in the last game, I believe that was Tuesday night, Mick Cronin got to the microphone and called his team soft and, quote, delusional. That's right, soft and delusional, saying that his players on his team seem to think that they're just going to roll the ball out onto the court and they are going to win games. And what they have found in the Big Ten is that, well, this ain't the Pac-12 anymore. There has got to be a certain toughness to this team. And a lot of people gave Mick Cronin a lot of criticism for coming out and throwing his team under the bus, and yet taking absolutely no responsibility himself. Now, that is Mick Cronin to a T. Anybody that remembers him back in Cincinnati, this is exactly vintage Mick Cronin, throwing his players under the bus and forcing them to answer. And in years past, we have seen this work for Mick Cronin. Will it work tonight for UCLA? The market doesn't think so, because this was a -4 for Maryland early today, and yet the money continues to roll in on the Terrapins here. 5.5 now is what we're starting to see in the market. This is going to be a pretty good litmus test. We're going to see if Mick Cronin and his message of being soft and delusional hit home with his players here tonight as the Bruins get ready to take on Maryland. Now, the interesting note in this game as well, Maryland has spent the last couple of games all week on the West Coast, and now they have to fly home to the East Coast to take on UCLA. UCLA, of course, was out west as well. They, too, now have to travel east. So this isn't your typical travel situation where you have a West Coast team who is going to be at a disadvantage because they've had to travel all week. No, Maryland is on that same level here. They, too, spent the entire week out west, having to fly back east. So I think all of that is mitigated in this game. The bottom line is going to come down to whether or not UCLA is tough enough and can make a stand against what is a pretty good Maryland Terps team here. I'm looking very forward to this game of the night here. We only had 14 games scheduled in college hoops here tonight. Looking forward to this one, though, at 8 o'clock Eastern time. You also have Minnesota taking on Wisconsin. Minnesota has covered exactly 2 games this season. 2. Yes. So the idea that they are somehow going to cover this one, even though they're getting 13 or 12.5 or 13 points, is probably little to none, as Wisconsin is home and Wisconsin is going scorched earth on folks. And Minnesota might just be the next one in line. In the NBA tonight, interesting slate of games here, highlighted, of course, by the fact that we learned today that Zion Williamson, while he won't be available for the Pelicans tonight, he's going to miss this game against the 76ers. Why? Because the team suspended him. What? Yes, that's right. If Zion Williamson is apparently not hurt, which he seems to be every other week, he is actually not meeting, quote, team standards. That's right, team standards. Just to give you a little backstory here, Zion has been limited to, here, let me see if I can count them on one hand. 1, 2, 3. Oh, no, I got to use 2 hands. I'm sorry. 7 games. He has played a total of 7 games for the Pelicans so far this season. And why has he only played 7 games? Shocker. He has been hurt. And, of course, now the team has to suspend him because of, I guess just a couple of hours ago we learned of this, by the way. But he is being suspended 1 game for a violation of team policies. From what we understand, it's being reported that he has been late for multiple practices already throughout the season. Coach Willie Green did not go into great detail, but did confirm during the pregame press conference that there were several occasions. There wasn't one isolated incident, but rather several occasions in which led up to Zion Williamson eventually being suspended now for one game. And that game is tonight with the 76ers. And as you can see, the market has reacted as they have gone ahead and now pushed the 76ers up a little bit higher now than the opening, which was around 4. We're starting to see 7 now. 7 and even 7.5 is what the Philadelphia 76ers are laying tonight in that one. But the real game of the night is going to be at Madison Square Garden as the New York Knicks are going to be taking on the Oklahoma City Thunder in a game that, listen, we're all looking forward to seeing round 2 because the Knicks were just in Oklahoma City last week, within the last 7 to 10 days. Didn't work out well for the Knicks in that one. Why? Well, they blew a lead, a pretty generous lead at that fact, as OKC had a absolutely huge fourth quarter and shot 62% from three-point range to come back and upend the New York Knicks. Will the Knicks return the favor here tonight? Well, they'll do it in a dog roll as they are actually getting points. I'm seeing 4.5 right now. We'll have much more on this game. Plus, of course, oh yeah, they're playing for a national championship or a right to have one. Ohio State taking on Texas. More as Game Time Decisions continue.
Jimmy Butler wants to leave because Jimmy Butler knows that Riles isn't going to pay him and he wants to get paid. Simply put, if they would have given Jimmy Butler this contract extension in the summer when he asked, this wouldn't be happening. But Riles did it, and Riles wanted him to play. So now he's disgruntled because he wants out.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this, I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text, put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, hey, I never got the text. And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. When he texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe, like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Statement from Giants president John Mara. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll will continue in their respective roles with the organization. As disappointing as the results of the season have been, Steve Tisch and I remain confident in the process that Joe and Brian have implemented.
The Giants, an absolute train wreck, and I love it.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It's going to be copy-paste. Books are not good. Win total's a tick too low. Knock it right over. Make playoff price tick too juicy. Bang it out. Postseason comes around on a tee. Knock their heads off.
I don't think the Steelers organization just makes a move to make a move. They have to have, it's like being in the book. You have to know what you're going to move the line to.
Game Time Decisions, only on SportsGrid.
My team didn't win this weekend, but I still did with this app that's taking over the game. Sports Millions Pick'em lets you make quick and easy predictions. Pick your favorite players, go higher or lower, and you can still win big even if your team loses. Plus, the multiplier is insane. With just a few picks, you can win big money. So get on it. They've got a welcome bonus to help you start off your winning streak.
All right, welcome back in Game Time Decisions here on the Sports Grid Network as we get ready for another of the college football playoff semifinal games here tonight as the Ohio State Buckeyes getting ready to take on the Texas Longhorns for the right to play for a national championship. We watched the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame get it done last night against Penn State. They await the winner of this game coming up tonight to play for that coveted national championship. And joining me now, our good friend Colby Dant, who was on the Irish last night, was actually on the show and told you guys all about Notre Dame's ability to win that game. Colby, as much as I want to blame, and it's so easy to blame James Franklin for that loss because he just doesn't win big games ever, I can't blame him for that loss last night. I think Notre Dame just flat out won the game, and they made the plays when it mattered the most, and Penn State and Drew Aller didn't. And I think it's as simple as that when it all came down to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think my handicap was pretty, I thought it was a tough game to handicap. I just thought I am going to bet on Drew Aller to make the mistakes down the stretch. But you're right. Yep. Notre Dame was down 10-0. What a drive right before the half with the field goal from the backup QB there. I think that was a huge moment in that game. But I'll throw a little shade at Franklin, kicking a field goal from the 2-yard line or the 1-yard line on the first drive. To me, I thought that was crazy because, Notre Dame's offense hadn't been very prolific. I think you back them up at the 1 or 2 if you don't get the 1-yard line or if you don't get the touchdown there. But to your credit, Notre Dame made a lot of big time plays. I mean, the play where both defensive backs fell down for Penn State on that touchdown there. And Riley Leonard just, he's a gamer, man. It's not super sexy, but it's just, and I actually think they could be live in the national championship regardless of who they play just because of Riley Leonard.
I got to give the kid credit where credit is due. I did not think that he had what it took to be able to get this team to a national championship, but yet here we are. And in the meantime, Ohio State, a clear favorite. And by the way, the look-ahead number this morning, Colby, if it is, in fact, Ohio State that advances to the national championship, I don't know if you saw this, 9.5 is what the opening line will be. That's the look-ahead number if it is, in fact, Ohio State taking on Notre Dame. But they got to win this game here tonight against Texas. Interesting, not so much from the side perspective. I'm still seeing 6s, which is kind of where we opened this thing up with. But it's the total that continues to get bet down. I'm seeing 51.5 now after it opened up at about 54.5. Wow, that's are we going to get a defensive struggle here? Because that game flew over the total last night of 45.
Yeah, I was shocked at that. But no, I mean, I like the over. I think the over is the play. I think Ohio State's clicking, as we saw, really the last 2 games in the playoffs. Ever since that Michigan game, that offense is clicking. They found themselves. And Chip Kelly's beginning to trust the outside receivers, which I don't understand why he ever – if you go back and watch that Michigan game, it's one of the more confusing game plans I've ever seen. But those receivers are super elite. And Will Howard seems to be playing the best ball of his career right now. And Texas secondary, I don't believe the Texas defense was actually that good. They were the number 1 rated defense coming into the playoffs. I don't believe that to be accurate, even though the numbers will tell you that. They played 6 or 7 backup quarterbacks throughout the season. And then even with that, their other games, they didn't play a lot of great quarterbacks like when they played Michigan. So I think they're a little more vulnerable. Arizona State had over 500 yards of offense against them. Clemson at 420, I believe. So I think Ohio State's going to be able to get theirs. And then on the other side of things, I do think Ohio State's D-line can cause some problems for the Texas run game, but I do think Texas got some guys in the air that could really challenge the Ohio State secondary. So I do think the over is the play. When it's all said and done, though, I like Ohio State to put it on. I think it might be close for 2-3 quarters, but down the stretch, the Buckeyes are ending up winning this thing by double digits.
The thing that I've noticed here with both these teams this year is the Texas defense racked up a lot of very good stats playing very weak offenses. And I have seen this Ohio State team that's the better the competition, the better they get. That is the mark of a Ryan Day team. Sometimes they tend to play down, but when they play competition of equal or better level, boy, oh boy, this not only Ohio State offense, but Ohio State defense shows up. And I can't say the same about the Texas offense, which worries me a little bit because when they played lesser teams, boy, oh boy, Quinn Ewers looks like All-American #1 draft pick. But when they've played better teams, better competition, the offense is not dropping 30 points or 35 points on you. It feels like Quinn Ewers against this Ohio State defense might be a mismatch.
Yeah, he's been all over the place. Now, he has the raw skills to beat you, and it's a fascinating game because if you talk to Ohio State fans, they'll bring up the fact that he stole $1.4 million from them for his freshman season, but playing the game. But, I completely agree. He's very inconsistent, and I think that bids well for Ohio State because, he throws a lot of balls that can be questionable. And with Ohio State's defense, I do think they could perhaps get a pick six or really challenge this offense. So I like the Buckeyes here, but I do think Ewers could put up some stats. So if you're looking for player props, he might be higher, being that I think they're going to be down for his passing total yards.
Well, the question is, do you think Texas plays from in front, which they have done in their playoff games? And then they had to hold on? Or do we think that they're going to be trailing and they're going to have to play comeback the entire game? That's going to be interesting. We'll talk more about it as Game Time Decisions continue.
I don't like to toot my own horn, and I know that I'm setting myself up for probably disappointment later tonight, but I hope you were with us last week on the Final Five because we almost swept the board. We had 2 out of 3 on the power play points with Reinhardt and Matthews. We hit the goal scorer line A. We hit the side with Washington. We hit the total with the over in Toronto and Buffalo. So we had a really good Final Five last week, and I'm hoping that we can now ride that wave.
Only on SportsGrid.
50 points in a fourth quarter for the Atlanta Hawks. What is going on? It's like circus numbers. What are we doing?
And we sound like 2 old heads complaining. It's a tough watch. It's a tough watch sometimes. I don't mind the shooting. I just know the numbers. When you strictly look at it from the numbers in betting, it's getting really hard to bet.
Game Time Decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
Louis Riddick has interviewed for every job in North America. And I'm not just talking football. I'm talking about every business in North America of any kind whatsoever. Tire companies, grocery store CEOs, shopping malls, insurance companies. What job hasn't Louis Riddick interviewed for?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
The NBA will take center stage once football stops, and people will watch the NBA playoffs and all that. But the standings are whacked out in the Western Conference. Oklahoma City, Memphis, and the Houston Rockets are the best teams in the conference.
You want to talk about a team with overs and no defense? The Wizards are your team. It's unbelievable. They can't make a total high enough. It's nuts.
Sports Rage tonight. Weeknights 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back in here. Game Time Decisions on the SportsGrid Network. Joe Raineri joined by Colby Dan as we're getting ready, of course, for the big game here tonight. The other half of the semifinal for the national championship. Notre Dame awaits Ohio State getting ready, laying that 6 points, 6.5 points there against Texas. And I keep hearing how, all the values on Texas. Well, not if they lose by double digits. There's not, Colby. There's not a lot of value. You can have all the value you want. But if Texas loses by double digits, what does that value pay? I don't get it here. I'm sorry. I don't have these two teams on equal footing. I do think this train of Ohio State, very hard for me to get in front of. I think getting under a touchdown, call me crazy. I think the value is on Ohio State here.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you. And I mean, really, if you go team by, position by position within the team, the only edge I would give Texas is I think Texas's offensive line is better than Ohio State's offensive line. However, they have to block Ohio State's defensive line, which I think is arguably the best in football. So I don't think they're going to be able to establish the run. I was shocked last week when they only ran for 40 some yards against Arizona State, who does not, they basically, got their defensive line from like backups in the portal. So now you're going to be going up against Ohio State's D line. And if you couldn't get that going against ASU, I doubt you're going to get it going against the Buckeyes here. So I think it's just, you look at every position for the most part, even the kicking game. I mean, Texas's kicker last time we saw him out there was missing kicks left and right. So I'm on the Buckeyes laying the points too. I think it's essential if you're if you're on Texas that they strike first, because that's one thing I will say. If you're building a case for how we lose this, make Ohio State feel uncomfortable, and I think that would be Texas scoring first, and putting pressure on Will Howard to deliver would be to me the best way for Texas to mess with Ohio State.
Yeah, listen, I think what's happening is that if you really think Texas stays within this number, it better be an under. I'll tell you that. I don't think it's correlated. I think Ohio State covers, and I think this thing goes flying over. I'd probably even take a stab at the Ohio State team total over because that's how much success I think they're going to have in this game. All right, I want to ask you quick in college hoops, Colby. I love what Mick Cronin did. It's vintage Mick Cronin. He takes no responsibility and throws his team right under a bus, calls them soft and delusional. And you know what? Somebody had to say it. It's worked for him in years past. Does it work tonight here against Maryland?
Yeah, I love how he threw his stats in there. He's like, I have over 500 wins. It's like, okay, egomaniac. But that's him. I'm on the Bruins. I think he, you question your toughness of your team. I know it's one of these strange new Big Ten games, which haven't been going good for these Pac-12 teams. Very far trip. But another thing is, they're kind of playing for the city. If UCLA is located on the west side, the Palisades has been destroyed. So I kind of think there's a little extra there that they're playing for today. So I think the Bruins stay within that number, maybe even win the game outright.
I'm with you, man. It's worked in years past. He was the same way at Cincinnati. It's always the same with Mick Cronin. And got news for you. If you sign a scholarship to play for Mick Cronin, Colby, you know what you're signing up for. You know what I mean? This isn't a shock to these kids. So that's why I think this is exactly maybe what they needed for a wake-up call. Oklahoma City taking on the New York Knicks here tonight. Knicks get a second crack at this. They melted down in OKC last week. OKC, could we get a little bit of a 2-game losing streak happening tonight?
Oh, I think so. You would like taking if you taking OKC, fading them on the road, but they got a 10-point win back on January 3rd, I think it was, against the Knicks. It's a revenge spot. It's nothing like the Garden, and I'm gonna load up on the Knicks to get it done here.
I love that look here. Because I do think it's they may lose this Cleveland game twice. That's what I think. I think they were really excited to test themselves against the Cavs, and it didn't work here. And I think the Knicks are not going to allow them to shoot 62% from 3 again. Colby, Dan, brother, we appreciate the time. Enjoy the games. Stay safe, my man. Game Time Decisions will be back after this here on the Grid.
Jimmy Butler wants to leave because Jimmy Butler knows that Riles isn't going to pay him and he wants to get paid. Simply put, if they would have given Jimmy Butler this contract extension in the summer when he asked, this wouldn't be happening. But Riles did it, and Riles wanted him to play. So now he's disgruntled because he wants out.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this. I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text. Put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, "Hey, I never got the text." And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. He texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe. Like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Statement from Giants president John Mara. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll will continue in their respective roles with the organization. As disappointing as the results of the season have been, Steve Tisch and I remain confident in the process that Joe and Brian have implemented.
The Giants, an absolute train wreck, and I love it.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
It's going to be copy-paste. Books are not good. Win total's a tick too low. Knock it right over. Make playoff price tick too juicy. Bang it out. Postseason comes around on a tee. Knock their heads off.
I don't think the Steelers organization just makes a move to make a move. They have to have, it's like being in the book. You have to know what you're going to move the line to.
Game Time Decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back in here. Game Time Decisions on this Friday now, January the 10th. I'm Joe Raineri. Appreciate you stopping by as we're getting ready, of course, for the big game tonight, the semifinal, number 2 in the college football playoff, as the Ohio State Buckeyes get ready to take on the University of Texas for the right to play for a national championship, as Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish, at the Orange Bowl last night, got it done against Penn State in what was a game that featured 4 lead changes and a wild second half, including a fourth quarter that saw all sorts of points in it. And the bottom line is Notre Dame, Riley Leonard and company, they made more plays. That mattered at big moments in that game last night, which is why they have already punched their ticket to Atlanta, getting ready for the winner of tonight's game between Ohio State and Texas. And this is going to be an interesting one. Again, starting to see a lot of under money showing up in the marketplace here tonight, as this game opened up 54 and a half. It has been bet down now to about 51 and a half as the under money is rolling. However, the Ohio State money is staying strong here as we're still seeing 6s, 6.5s in the marketplace. We just talked to our good friend Colby Dant. I am of the same mindset with him. Value only counts if you actually win. And I think the value might very well be on the Ohio State side because you're able to get them under a touchdown. Now, last night we had we saw a line flip, right? We saw Penn State go from a underdog to a slight favorite. By the time that game kicked off last night, there was stories about the flu and guys being sick on the Notre Dame side. All of it, well, it might very well have been true, but the bottom line is it certainly didn't affect the kicker, nor did it affect Riley Leonard or anybody else on Notre Dame. They were able to get it done against Penn State in a total that closed at 45, but that total landed at 51 last night. Why? Well, because we saw a really crazy second half where the offenses had a couple of great drives on both teams. They were able to put it together. Now, if we're being honest, the Ohio State offense and the Texas offense certainly feels like they would have a whole heck of a lot more success than the offense of what Penn State or Notre Dame could bring to the table. And those two teams put up 51 points last night, and we didn't get any sort of pick sixes or punt returns or anything along those lines. So I do think that it makes sense that the total is going down simply because if you like Texas to stay within a touchdown, it better be lower scoring. I do not believe it favors Texas to get in any sort of shootout here with Ohio State. I think if Texas has a legit shot of not only covering but maybe winning this game, the best way for them to do that is by running the ball. And here's what I mean. In Texas this year, and we all give Quinn Ewers all this credit, I think the guy is a wild card because depending on which version of Quinn Ewers shows up will depend on what happens tonight in this game for Texas. But the reality is the Texas offense all year long goes when its running game goes. In 13 wins this year for Texas, they averaged almost 5 yards per carry. In the 2 losses that they had, while their running game fell apart, and they averaged just about 1 yard per carry in those 2 losses. Even against Arizona State, which isn't a very good rushing defense, by the way, at all, they had 30 carries for 53 yards. It is no wonder why that game went to overtime, and they almost lost. We just watched an Ohio State defense hold one of the best rushing offenses in the country in Oregon to minus 23 yards. Let me repeat, minus 23 yards. This could be an absolute blowout in the making if Texas is not able to establish the run in some semblance and take the pressure off for Quinn Ewers. If you're going to ask Quinn Ewers to drop back 30 times in this game, 35 times in this game, things are not going well for Texas. That means they are a couple of scores behind, and Quinn Ewers eventually will make that interception or that mistake, and all of a sudden, an Ohio State 7-point lead could be an Ohio State 17-point lead with this defense. So, to me, this all rests in whether or not Texas, early in this game, can have any success rushing against this Ohio State defense. Because, again, the numbers tell you everything. 13 wins, you're averaging 5 yards a carry. In your losses, including a near loss in double overtime last week, my goodness, 30 carries for 53 yards is not going to get it done against Ohio State. It was good enough to get past Arizona State, but I think we all agree if this game was Arizona State versus Ohio State, the line would be nearly over 2 touchdowns. So I think the key for Texas and anybody looking to back Texas, you better hope that that offensive line can handle business against that front of Ohio State, because if they can, then they are very much live to win this game outright and upset Ohio State. We mentioned earlier the look-ahead lines are out for the potential matchups against Notre Dame, and it's worth repeating. Ohio State, if they are to win this game and advance to the national championship in Atlanta, they're looking at a 9.5-point favorite over Notre Dame. Again, almost a 9.5, almost a double-digit favorite against Notre Dame. If it is Texas that advances and wins this game, well, they're looking to be just a 3-point favorite over Notre Dame. So what you're seeing and what the market is telling you is that either way, Ohio State or Texas, Notre Dame is an underdog here. Now, some people might say the value is going to be on Notre Dame one way or the other. Listen, Notre Dame was a pretty good team back in 2012, the last time that they actually made it to a national championship game. And do you know what happened there? They ran into Alabama and Nick Saban, and boy, oh boy, that game was not pretty. I have a feeling that this is exactly if Ohio State, and because I do think Ohio State not only wins this game, I think they win it rather easily. I also think Ohio State goes into that national championship game against Notre Dame as a double-digit favorite at some point, and with good reason. There are levels to this, and Ohio State is just a different level right now, and a train that is going downhill in which I don't want to be on the other side there, getting in front of it and trying to stop it here. I think the Buckeyes are going to outlast the Texas team here tonight. I think they're going to move on to the college football national championship, and I think they are going to run roughshod over everybody, proving on this very first year of a 12-team college football playoff that, yes, the Ohio State Buckeyes are back. Either way, I think the playoff committee looks like geniuses this year, as they ended up with not one, not two, not three, but four. That's right, count them. 4 blue blood football programs playing and vying for a chance to win a national championship, to the point where now they've got Notre Dame, which will be a absolute ratings bonanza. And if it's Ohio State, well, we already know what that's going to look like. Playoff committee wins in this national championship. We'll have more on it as GameTime Decisions continues on the grid.
Jimmy Butler wants to leave because Jimmy Butler knows that Riles isn't going to pay him, and he wants to get paid. Simply put, if they would have given Jimmy Butler this contract extension in the summer when he asked, this wouldn't be happening. But Riles did it, and Riles wanted him to play. So now he's disgruntled because he wants out.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this. I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text. Put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, "Hey, I never got the text." And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. He texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe. Like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Statement from Giants president John Mara. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll will continue in their respective roles with the organization. As disappointing as the results of the season have been, Steve Tisch and I remain confident in the process that Joe and Brian have implemented.
The Giants, an absolute train wreck, and I love it.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
It's going to be copy-paste. Books are, not good. Win total's a tick too low. Knock it right over. Make playoff price tick too juicy. Bang it out. Postseason comes around on a tee. Knock their heads off.
I don't think the Steelers organization just makes a move to make a move. They have to have, it's like being in the book. You have to know what you're going to move the line to.
Game Time Decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back in. It is Game Time Decisions here on the SportsGrid Network. I'm Joe Raineri, and we are getting ready for what should be a huge weekend in the world of sports, certainly when it comes to football, as the Ohio State Buckeyes getting ready to take on the Texas Longhorns for a chance to play for a national championship. And, of course, we have got you covered. We have got you until 7:30 Eastern time here, and then we'll pass off the baton to our friends on the in-game live crew as we did last night. They are getting ready for what should be, and we all hope, a pretty competitive matchup like the one that we got last night between Notre Dame and Penn State. But let's not forget, we got plenty else going on in the world of sports tonight. We got a couple of nice college basketball games going on, a light slate leading into what is going to be a huge weekend in college. But we also have plenty going on in the NHL. And like last night, we welcome in our good friend Joe Madden, who is ready for that puck to drop here tonight, JoJo. And it was so funny. When I woke up this morning, I'm laughing. You and I were talking about making fun of our good friend George Kurtz there and his Islanders. And I said, you know what? Joe Madden said there was a shutout coming in that game. I just did not think that the shutout was going to be that the Las Vegas Knights were going to be shut out by the Islanders. But you were right, Joe. There was a shutout in that game and the under hit.
Yeah, just absolutely the wrong team. Who would have thought Sorokin would have been able to stand on his head and that the Islanders would score 4 goals on Adin Hill? I was completely shocked with that outcome, Joe. Of course, I wasn't even watching that game, and then I checked the score and I went, "What the heck happened in that one?" So definitely the shutout, just the wrong team. So George,
I was
definitely would have
laughing.
been happy.
Yes, I know, because I did get a DM from him this morning, and I think it was a finger of some sort, but that's okay. Let's ask here, Joe, let's start tonight here as we get ready in just about 15 minutes or so, the Blackhawks and the Red Wings. This is a classic battle of in the area there. Unfortunately, neither of these two teams have been very relevant in recent memory here, but minus 180 Detroit. Didn't the Blackhawks just beat somebody? I think. Didn't they win a game?
Yeah, they did. They got that nice big win over the Colorado Avalanche, but the Avs were in that look-ahead situation, right? So they had come off that game versus your Florida Panthers. They were looking ahead to their second night of the back-to-back after the Blackhawks facing the Wild. So they were in an odd situation, but this Blackhawks team should be able to score on Detroit here. Now, Detroit has been rolling hot. They've won their last 5, Joe. So it makes sense why you're going to have to lay juice on them here to get the win. But I think you just stay off the side in this one. I'm just looking for both teams to come out so strong in this game and put up those goals. This one has a total of 6.5. I love it to the over. If you're seeing 5.5s out there, because there were some 5.5s on some books, you got to lay the juice. So ult it up to that 6.5. You will get plus money. I think we get 9 goals in this one, Joe. The last time these teams played in November, the Detroit Red Wings did win 4-1, but I do think the Blackhawks will put their share of the goals on the board. And then you've got to look at some goal scorers. Tyler Bertuzzi has been outstanding for the Chicago Blackhawks. I think he gets on the board. He's almost 3-1 to your money. And then Patrick Kane versus his former team here. You know he's going to come out with a vengeance. So he's around that plus 275 for the anytime goal.
Yeah, I mean, who'd have thunk it, right? Detroit fires their former head coach there just after Christmas, I think. And now all of a sudden rattling off 5 straight wins. We've seen it before, Joe. If it ain't broke, I guess don't fix it. I don't mind laying the puck and a half either with Detroit here against the Blackhawks. Couple of other interesting games. How about the Montreal Canadiens as a big dog here tonight against the Washington Capitals in D.C. tonight? Do we trust the Caps in this one?
You got to trust one of these players, right? Look at who is the player who's been held off the board the last couple of games. That is chasing Wayne Gretzky's record. Of course, we've got to look at Ovechkin here. So he's 22 goals away. And Joe, I did a couple of laddering situations with him. I took him for the anytime goal, and then I took him for 2+ goals at that plus 350 mark, and then plus 650, and then I looked at him for the hat trick tonight at plus 3,200. You look here at the goaltender coming out for Montreal. This is a young kid that has played in 2 games, and he's just blown people away in the 2 games that he's come out in. His name is Dobbs out there. He's gone 2-0. He's recorded those wins, and they're against great teams, Colorado and Florida. He got the shutout win versus the Florida Panthers, stopping all 34 shots. Versus Colorado, he stopped 22-23 shots on his net. He's coming in from Montreal tonight, and something's got to give. This Washington Capitals team is so strong. They're electric offensively, and I think Ovechkin, with being held off in the last couple games, comes out firing. Now, because I'm thinking Ovechkin can get at least 2 goals in this one, I'm laddering it up to the hat trick. I have to look at the Washington Capitals team total. That team total coming in at 3.5 at -116 to the over. I just don't trust Montreal here to put up that resistance defensively. Now, could Montreal score as well? They absolutely could. Charlie Lindgren confirmed in net here for the Washington Capitals. I just want to take them out of the equation. We know how strong this team has been, especially as of late. They've won their last 2. They beat the Canucks in overtime. So this is a dangerous underdog here. So I don't want to side in this, just that team total. We could finish 5-4 for the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm hearing comparisons to Patrick Roy, and I'm laughing. I'm like, listen, guys, it's 2 games. Can we? I mean, granted, the kid has looked good, but he's going to have to do it a little bit more before we start mentioning him along Patrick Roy. Canadian fans have been waiting to do that forever, Joe. Just any positiveness in that would be great for them. And Patrick Lane, I believe, still out for the Habs, too, in this one. So Washington, it looks like it is here. What about Vancouver tonight here? Are you leaning towards them or Carolina?
Well, I think they are a live dog here. I'm playing the number, Joe. We're getting a great number with the Vancouver Canucks here. The inconsistencies out of Carolina are just too much for me, even though this team is so strong at home. With a backup goaltender in, I do think Vancouver, with how strong they've been out there on the road, have every ability to get this win in a lower scoring game. Take JT Miller for the anytime goal tonight.
All right, we'll talk more about that. A couple of more games on the NHL slate we'll go over with Joe Madden. So come back and join us here. Game Time Decisions continues.
Jimmy Butler wants to leave because Jimmy Butler knows that Riles isn't going to pay him, and he wants to get paid. Simply put, if they would have given Jimmy Butler this contract extension in the summer when he asked, this wouldn't be happening. But Riles did it, and Riles wanted him to play. So now he's disgruntled because he wants out.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this. I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text. Put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, "Hey, I never got the text." And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. He texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe. Like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Statement from Giants president John Mara. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll will continue in their respective roles with the organization. As disappointing as the results of the season have been, Steve Tisch and I remain confident in the process that Joe and Brian have implemented.
The Giants, an absolute train wreck, and I love it.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
It's going to be copy-paste. Books are not good. Win total's a tick too low. Knock it right over. Make playoff price tick too juicy. Bang it out. Postseason comes around on a tee. Knock their heads off.
I don't think the Steelers organization just makes a move to make a move. They have to have, it's like being in the book. You have to know what you're going to move the line to.
Game Time Decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back in here. Game Time Decisions on the SportsGrid Network. A very happy Friday to you as we welcome back in our good friend Joe Madden. Couple more games in the NHL tonight, Joe. I want to get your thoughts on. We'll go out to Winnipeg as the Kings and Winnipeg Jets in a pick'em price range here, which is interesting. What are you thinking of this one?
Yeah, really good game here between two strong defensive units with strong goaltending. Now, Eric Crombie will be in net, not Connor Hellebuck for the Winnipeg Jets. Darcy Kemper on the other side. And I do think when you look at that, you have to look here at the Winnipeg Jets team total. I'm going to take it to the under 2.5 goals, Joe. It's coming in at plus 126. I think this is a 2-1 win here for the Jets. This is going to be a tight battle between these two, a defensive one that they might be able to win in that first period if you want to look at a first period puck line there for them, but I'll stay on the under 2.5 for their team total.
Ooh, I like that. All right, and the Sharks taking on Utah tonight here. Not necessarily a pick'em. What are you thinking?
Yeah, both of these teams are just allowing these goals to come in like crazy. But one thing that the Sharks do have on their side is Georgiev has been strong in net for them versus Utah when they were the Arizona Hockey Club, or the Arizona Coyotes. So I do think we could see the Sharks pulling off the upset. You know, I always love a dog, but I'm going to look at the first period over 1.5 goals and both teams to score in the first period. Both teams to score in the first period coming in at plus 184. Playmakers on both sides. You got to look at Clayton Keller for the anytime goal here for Utah, and then give me Celebrini or Toffoli here for the Sharks.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Joe Madden, we appreciate it as always. We'll see you here in just a minute. Enjoy the games here tonight, but we do have, of course, a big slate coming up in Wild Card Weekend, so no better time than to hear from Joe and our good friend Tom Vecchio for a little Sports Millions Pick'em coming up this week. What do you guys got for us?
It's time to get back into our Sports Million Pick'ems, Tom. We're looking at a couple of different games out there in the playoffs. I'm going to focus on the Chargers versus the Bolts, and I know that you want to kick us off with the Washington Commanders versus the Buccaneers.
Yeah, huge game between these two teams. They played all the way back in week one. We don't want to be taking too much from that. I want to be going to Brian Robinson Jr., the running back for the Commanders, lower than 46.5 rushing yards. The Bucs' run defense has been absolutely awesome, especially to close out the season. Now, granted, they played some teams with varying degrees of offensive strength, whether it be the Saints, whether it be the Panthers, but with Vita Vea in the middle there, they have shut things down. They're allowing 97 rushing yards per game. That is the fourth best in the NFL. And then we look to Robinson. He's been a bit up and down. Again, granted, at the end of the season, he wasn't playing at full capacity, but with Austin Eckler back, I just don't expect this to be a big run game. Despite a big total north of 50 points, I expect this to be a more passing game for the Commanders. So Brian Robinson, lower than 46.5 rushing yards. What do you got?
I love where you're going with that one. And when I look at the Chargers versus the Texans, I've got to look at J.K. Dobbins here. J.K. Dobbins is so pivotal in that run game out here for the L.A. Chargers, and we know Jim Harbaugh wants to bring it. Looking at the Houston Texans on the defensive side of the ball, Tom, we know this team is so strong in the secondary, but it is a team that is still allowing mid-of-the-pack rushing yards on the ground. And when we look at J.K. Dobbins and how strong he's been on the season, 905 rushing yards for 9 rushing touchdowns, I do think that he can go higher than his 61.5 rushing yards. So I will lock in a J.K. Dobbins higher than 61.5 rushing yards in this matchup, Tom.
I love that. Robinson lower than 46.5. We have an awesome weekend of football coming up. I'm ready for it.
It's going to be a great weekend, and make sure you join us back here next week for more of our Sports Millions Pick'ems.
All right, we appreciate it, Joe and Tom. We'll talk to Tom Vecchio here coming up in just a minute, as we've got plenty to go over coming up for Wild Card Weekend. That's just a little taste there with the Sports Millions Pick'em. Opportunities across the board starting tomorrow at 4:30 Eastern as we get ready for the start of postseason NFL football. And we'll have to go to Houston to see whether or not C.J. Stroud and that entire sophomore jinx was, well, a little overblown. He'll have an opportunity to put, this was a very rough season for C.J. Stroud in his sophomore year. Boy, he can make people forget all about it by a home win in the playoffs against the Chargers. Can he get it done? We'll talk to Tom Vecchio. We'll spend a whole lot of time getting you ready, of course, for Ohio State and Texas. The winner gets to play for a national championship against Notre Dame. Don't go anywhere. Come back and join us. Game Time Decisions continues here on the Grid.
Jimmy Butler wants to leave because Jimmy Butler knows that Riles isn't going to pay him, and he wants to get paid. Simply put, if they would have given Jimmy Butler this contract extension in the summer when he asked, this wouldn't be happening. But Riles did it, and Riles wanted him to play. So now he's disgruntled because he wants out.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this. I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text. Put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, "Hey, I never got the text." And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. He texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe. Like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the book.
Statement from Giants president John Mara. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll will continue in their respective roles with the organization. As disappointing as the results of the season have been, Steve Tisch and I remain confident in the process that Joe and Brian have implemented.
The Giants, an absolute train wreck, and I love it.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It's going to be copy-paste. Books are not good. Win total's a tick too low. Knock it right over. Make playoff price tick too juicy. Bang it out. Postseason comes around on a tee. Knock their heads off.
I don't think the Steelers organization just makes a move to make a move. They have to have, it's like being in the book. You have to know what you're going to move the line to.
Game Time Decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Just getting worse by the minute. Game Time Decisions. Welcome back in as we got another hour together, actually a half hour together as we await the kickoff in the second of the semifinal games in the college football playoff. The Ohio State Buckeyes getting ready to take on the Texas Longhorns. That's coming up the bottom of the hour. And of course, our in-game live crew, Joe Lisi and company, Ben Stevens, Kevin Walsh, they'll all have you covered. Everything that you need to know from the opening kickoff right through the end. Who is it that will be playing for a national championship? Should be a great game. We're looking forward to it. But we also have a huge card in the NFL starting tomorrow. Wild Card Weekend is upon us. And here to help us break down some of these games, our good friend Tom Vecchio in the house. And Tom, can't believe it. It's wild looking at the odds board across in some of these games. We've got a couple of what is your usual 3 points, 2.5, 3 points. We got a couple of really big lines here. We've got some big totals. We got a little something for everyone. And we even have a road favorite kicking it off tomorrow with the Chargers. 4:30 Eastern time kick, going to Houston. I mean, really? The entire world seems to be betting the Chargers. Is there any way Houston pulls out the upset as a home dog here?
There's a chance, and it comes down to what we see on the ground from J.K. Dobbins, because if he's unable to get going, the Houston secondary can be good. I'm not going to say it's amazing, but it can be good at times. And if Dobbins, a little bit banged up, even after it came back off of IR, a little bit banged up in the game to end the season against the Pats, like if they can't get the ball moving in the air, there's a chance that the Texans do show up. I think breaking down this game, you have to have your places, like you have to have them set. And if you don't have them set, I would say stay away until you get to the end game. Because do I want the Chargers at -3? No, but if the game starts off a little bit slow, maybe they get out to they fall behind, slight lead, and you get them at -2.5. Obviously, not that much of a difference, but it is a difference. That's a spot that I'd be willing to take them. I don't know if I love the 3 though.
It feels like it's interesting because all the tickets appear to be the public loves the Chargers because they don't feel that they can trust Houston. And I get it, that offensive line is not great. But how about some anytime touchdown props? Or is there anybody we should be concentrating on when it comes here? Ladd McConkey? Like, who's doing the scoring in a game that the total continues to drop? I'm seeing 41.5 now.
Yeah, I think the touchdowns are really interesting because we have a team that's a favorite, and the first player on the list, like you said, is either McConkey or Dobbins at +145 or +140. So we have a team that's expected to win, expected to score, but we just don't know who is going to be doing the scoring. So there's a chance that you could take a shot on 1 or 2 players. Hopefully they get into the end zone. I think Ladd McConkey would be that answer for me at +145. That's just where I think the ball will be going from Justin Herbert. On the other side, I don't mind taking a longer shot on someone like Dalton Schultz. He's up at +370. I know he's not the main option in the offense. That should be Joe Mixon and Nico Collins. But if you expect the Texans to at least keep this game close, I'm going to be looking down to one of those really secondary or tertiary options. I'm not going to the chalk at Joe Mixon at -115. That's just not something that I do. I think the other games are also really interesting when it comes to a touchdown perspective, when it comes to Ravens, because if they're going to be scoring 4 touchdowns, someone else has to get in the end zone besides Derrick Henry.
Well, they better. And then the question is, does Pittsburgh even get into the end zone here? As we're still seeing this right around 9.5. I even saw 10 pop up earlier today. That total, 43.5. And I don't see it getting there unless you think, Tommy, that Pittsburgh can handle and score 17 to 20 points their own. I don't know how this thing gets over 43.5, but is anybody good in Pittsburgh in the TD market?
That's what I'm really having trouble with. It is interesting that the fact that we have the first player, Najee Harris, at +220 or Pickens at +230, they're just not expected to score. And then if they score, we just don't know who it's going to be. So I have a really tough time. This is something I don't love to do, but kicker props, Chris Boswell is legit awesome. And, whether it's 6.5 for kicker points or you can go to over 1.5 field goals, I'd have to double check the odds on over 1.5 field goals. I assume it's juiced pretty heavily, maybe -150 thereabouts, but he's been their best option. How many games this year that they have 4 or 5 field goals they end up winning because they can't score touchdowns, but they have the field goals from him. So them finishing with 13 points, right? A touchdown and 2 field goals, that's pretty realistic. And if the Ravens get out there and score 24, I think they can cover that number, and we may fall under. Kind of what we spoke about last night. If that's what I'm really feeling.
What about, and it would be the only guy that I'd consider because I do think he's the wild card for the Pittsburgh Steelers, is what about Jaylen Warren? A guy that is dual threat to be able to catch the ball out of the backfield, which, again, is a problem for the Baltimore defense. It's the one thing they haven't fixed. The screen game of Pittsburgh, it ain't going to be with Najee. It's going to be with Jaylen Warren. Maybe a receiving prop or really anytime touchdown for him as well.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I'm looking at that now for him, and I think that might be 21 yards in terms of just total receiving yards. Or you break that off in 2 runs. You can break that off in 1 run with a little bit of pressure, forcing Russell Wilson to get rid of the ball quickly. George Pickens isn't the option downfield. Maybe it's a couple of dump downs to Pat Freiermuth. But if they can't get the ball moving on the ground, Warren's going to be the one in the game. So 21.5 is a number I guess I'm talking myself into at this point.
Yep. You're welcome. 6 of the last 9, I have him going way over this mark. So this is not a big number for him at all in the receiving game there. And of course,
quickly before we move on real quick, I do like Mark Andrews over 45.5 receiving yards on the Ravens side. Zay Flowers has already been ruled out. When it comes down to it, Lamar, Derrick Henry, and let's call it Mark Andrews, they got to account for like 80% of their offense. Rashad Bateman's that deep ball threat. If they learn from what they did last year against the Chiefs, They just need to pick up first downs. They will be in control of this game. So you don't need these deep shots to Rashad Bateman. You need to pick up first downs with Derrick Henry, pick up first downs with Mark Andrews, keep the ball moving, and that's it. As simple as possible for the Ravens. That is what their game plan should be.
I'll give you one more here. There's no chance Derrick Henry doesn't get more than 20 and a half carries, right? It feels like, right? It's a good number.
It has to be like what we saw from last year. Well, how many 3 and outs did they have? Granted, he wasn't on the team last year when they played the Chiefs, but 3 and outs, they're constantly punting.
Yep.
It's just, like, you know what the answer is, just stick to it, and the success will be there.
So one of the other games that we have a little more clarity on is that Green Bay-Philadelphia game. So we know that Jalen Hurts is in. He has cleared the concussion protocol. It feels like the Saquon Barkley game here if I am Philadelphia. And then, of course, Green Bay, they got a pretty good running back as well. What do we do in this one?
For this one, so earlier in the week when I was on the early line on, I don't know, Thursday, I guess it was, at that point, I talked about A.J. Brown under 87.5 receiving yards, which I mentioned here. That number has already dropped to 80. So that is a really good spot. So I like that. Jalen Hurts, I also like under 9.5 rushing attempts. He's coming out of the concussion protocol. He does not need to be running the ball. Like you said, it is a Saquon Barkley game for the Eagles. Just give the ball to him.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs, too, is interesting. We'll look at his number, and then, of course, what you think of Jordan Love, and should we be looking at passing props? We'll have more with Tom when Game Time Decisions continues here on the Grid.
So my team didn't win this weekend, but I still did with this app that's taking over the game. Sports Millions Pick'em lets you make quick and easy predictions. Pick your favorite players, go higher or lower, and you can still win big even if your team loses. Plus, the multiplier is insane. With just a few picks, you can win big money. So get on it. They've got a welcome bonus to help you start off your winning streak.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The sharpest football contest show in the land, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show, focuses on Circa Sports Million, Circa Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. With 2 former Super Contest winners, Brady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season like none other.
It's a new era in CFP to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of the week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoffs.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was thinking! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back in Game Time Decisions here on the Sports Grid Network as we are T-minus about 15 minutes or so before we hand off the controls to the semifinal national championship qualifier, if you will, as the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Texas Longhorns getting ready to do battle in the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. The winner advances to play for a national championship, gets to take on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So before we get to that point, we want to rattle off with our good friend Tom Vecchio a couple of more of these props in these games coming up in Wild Card Weekend. Let's go back to that Philadelphia-Green Bay game once again now that we have some clarity on this. It does feel like it's going to be the Saquon Barkley versus Josh Jacobs. The question is, where does Jordan Love fit in this? Is Jordan Love, should we be looking at over his passing props? Are they trailing most of this game? Like, what do we think we're going to get from Jordan Love in this one?
You know, that's the question I've been asking myself, because if Josh Jacobs, I think Josh Jacobs, like, controlling the ball is the best route to them winning this game. But if they do fall behind, you know, can Jordan Love get to some of these props just basically based on attrition? Like, he's just going to pile up yards. He's going to pile up, like, over 30.5 passing attempts is something that I'm interested in. Can he get there just because they have to pass the ball? Like, we're not talking about an extreme level of efficiency, especially for the yards up at 220.5. It's not going to be like this is their game plan. They want to go in and they're going to, like, torch this secondary. But he'll just get there because he has to get there. So that's the question I've been asking myself. And, you know, if I can get over 30.5, it's at minus 128 right now. So if I get 30.5 and it's at, you know, minus 110 or minus 115, that's what I would prefer. But I'm a little bit hesitant on Jordan Love at this point.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a interesting game, but I think it's going to be ball control. I do like the under in the game at 45.5 because I think it's going to be they know it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I don't think it's going to be any sort of like what we got in Brazil, right? The first game of the year, this wild, crazy shootout. Don't see that happening. I can't say the same about the Denver-Buffalo game because this one I do feel like is going to be a wild one. I think there are going to be some points in this one scored. A lot of different ways to look at both these teams here. Who are some of the guys you're focused on, Tom?
So for Buffalo, it's actually tough, and this is the issue. I don't want to say the issue, but it's like a good problem to have for Buffalo where they have so many options now, and obviously with Diggs gone this year, they've really spread the ball around. So there have been games where we've seen Khalil Shakir like play an awesome role, and he's been that possession receiver underneath, kind of similar to what we see from Amon-Ra St. Brown for the Lions. There's been games where it's a huge game on the ground for James Cook, and then Ray Davis is involved, and Ty Johnson. They have Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox, and they traded for Amari Cooper, and then they're working with Keon Coleman. They have too many options. So at a certain point, it's actually tough to nail down who is going to be seeing the ball. So you can simply play it safe and go with a Josh Allen TD. I think that's certainly fine. I do expect the Bills to be out in front of this game. Do you think they're going to cover this, the 8.5?
I do. I think I think they're going to pull away late. I think Bo Nix is going to have to play from behind, and rookies in these spots are not how you make money. I do think in Orchard Park we could get one of those defensive line, interceptions or fumble returns to the 5, and it's an easy score late to get them over here. But when you look at the amount of points the Buffalo Bills offense has been scoring here, they have scored 30-plus points in 9 of their last 10 games when they weren't resting the starters, of course. Right. They also scored 40 or more in 3 of their last 4. Like, what? How are we not getting a Buffalo team total? And just go pick your poison. Anytime touchdown, Josh Allen. Cook, anytime touchdown. It just feels like rinse and repeat, no?
Yeah, I think that's what we're going to be getting. So as I mentioned the other day, I specifically like Bo Nix over 34.5 passing attempts. That has moved up to 35. Yes. The Bo Nix interception prop, I'm seeing at minus 156. But like you said, if they're 8.5-point underdogs, they're going to be playing from behind. As I also discussed, here a couple of days ago, they can't run the ball. They actually cannot run the ball. So just the higher volume of passing attempts for Bo Nix will put him at an increased risk of throwing an interception. So obviously the minus 156, we have to understand what those odds mean, but I do think it's a good play.
And a lot of the reason why, especially since week 11, Denver, a top 3 offense in converting inside the red zone. And that's amazing. And the Bills, we already know you don't score 30 and 40 points a game if you can't convert inside the red zone. So that's why I love points in this one. I think they'll be able to score. I just think eventually they're not going to be able to go point to point against the Buffalo Bills. Washington, Tampa. This too is another game. I wouldn't want to be on the under, but I want to be on Baker Mayfield and Bucky Irving props. No?
Yeah, that's the best spot to look. We have the Mike Evans, Marshawn Lattimore rivalry in this game. You know, part of me wants to I want to take the under on Mike Evans and buy into that, but I also can't do that at times. So I'm actually waiting to see if K. Dot is officially going to be active. And I actually do see his props for the first time at 29.5. That I don't mind for his receiving. So if Mike Evans is going to be locked up, McMillan's been great for the Bucs, but 53.5, that line is just simply too high. So I don't mind staying away from that. K-Don in the middle of the field, over 29.5 receiving yards. I do like that as well. And then one quick one. I know we're coming up to a break in a few minutes, but for tonight's game, Jeremiah Smith over 29.5 for his longest reception.
Ooh, Ohio State looking at that one tonight. Did you get they changed the Minnesota Ram game, of course, because of the devastating fires in L.A. They're going to Glendale. I'm seeing more Minnesota money coming. It's still indoors. It's not like the Rams had a home field anyway. But 2.5, the total at 48 here. And this, too, feels like I don't expect either defense to limit the offenses of these two teams. Do you?
I don't. And the number I've been looking at mostly, or I've been trying to find, would be Puka total receptions, which I'm still seeing at 7.5. I don't mind it at minus 120. If you can get it at minus 110, that'd be the spot to go. But if they have to move the chains, because the Vikings run defense has been awesome this year, it's going to be going to Puka, not Cooper Kupp.
I agree. Yeah, I like it. I think Kyron Williams is going to have some success. He had plenty of it in the first game against this Minnesota defense. I think he'll have more of it in this one as well. Tom Vecchio, always a pleasure, my man. Enjoy the games. And Game Time Decisions. We'll wrap it up next here on the Grid.
Jimmy Butler wants to leave because Jimmy Butler knows that Riles isn't going to pay him, and he wants to get paid. Simply put, if they would have given Jimmy Butler this contract extension in the summer when he asked, this wouldn't be happening. But Riles did it, and Riles wanted him to play. So now he's disgruntled because he wants out.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this. I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text. Put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, hey, I never got the text. And I'm like,
no.
Oh, yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. He texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe. Like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Statement from Giants president John Mara. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll will continue in their respective roles with the organization. As disappointing as the results of the season have been, Steve Tisch and I remain confident in the process that Joe and Brian have implemented.
The Giants, an absolute train wreck, and I love it.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It's going to be copy-paste. Books up, not good. Win total's a tick too low. Knock it right over. Make playoff price tick too juicy. Bang it out. Postseason comes around on a tee. Knock their heads off.
I don't think the Steelers organization just makes a move to make a move. They have to have, it's like being in the book. You have to know what you're going to move the line to.
Game Time Decisions, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back in here. Game Time Decisions as we get ready for the second semifinal with a right and a chance to win a national championship in college football. We're that much closer to crowning a champion. And the kickoff here in just a few. We're going to hand it off, of course, to our good friends as In-Game Live is coming up next. Ben Stevens, Joe Lisi, Kevin Walsh. They will have you all night long here as the Ohio State Buckeyes taking on the Texas Longhorns. Will Ryan Day and Chip Kelly and Will Howard advance to take on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish? Or will Quinn Ewers and Steve Sarkisian and maybe an appearance by a dude with the name Manning on his jersey? Maybe that happens here tonight. We'll give you some of our final thoughts and final plays on that game. But now would be a good time to talk a little bit here about our Sports Millions Blitz'em. Check it out.
Enjoy Sports Millions pick'ems, but hate making the picks yourself? Well, Sports Millions has you covered. Head on over and play Sports Millions Blitz'em right now and let the computer do the work. Go to sportsmillions.com/blitz'em to be able to win big prizes without having to make a single pick yourself. That's sportsmillions.com/blitz'em.
All right, appreciate that. And we get ready, of course, for the Cotton Bowl, AT&T Stadium, where the Dallas Cowboys lose games quite often this year, apparently. That is where this game will take place, and it should be a good one. I'll tell you this right now, though. It appears the under continuing to take money. We're seeing this thing down to 51.5. You can still get sixes with Ohio State, but there is no doubt there is a lot of love in the marketplace for the Ohio State Buckeyes. And I am telling you, the key to this is going to be, can the Texas Longhorns run the ball? If they can't, and I think we'll know this rather early, if they can't run the ball, it's going to be a long night for the Texas Longhorns. So I do think there is a good opportunity for those that might want to get in on Texas. I think Texas in the first half is not a bad look. They have led at the break in just about all of their games, really, but certainly in the playoffs. And then they had to hold on for dear life in the second half, which is what worries me when it comes to Steve Sarkisian. They don't do well necessarily with a lead. We have yet to see Texas back against the wall, having to come back, although they did a pretty good job in overtime against Arizona State. But the idea that they even got it to overtime because they couldn't hold on in the second half is worrisome. They got over 300 yards of offense against this Texas defense, mostly in the second half and on the ground. That being Arizona State. And we watched Cade Klubnik light up this Texas secondary. And again, Texas was great against terrible competition, which is how they padded a lot of those stats early in the year. This is going to be a different animal. This is by far, we just watched, listen, Notre Dame handle business against Georgia. Georgia beat this team not once, but twice. And imagine if Michigan and Ohio State had a second go-around. Do we really think Ohio State would lose that game twice? Because they had an opportunity to lose twice to Oregon, and look at that worked out. That worries me about Sarkisian in Texas, where they had a second bite at the apple, couldn't get it done. I do think this is going to be by far the best defense Texas has seen all year. And I certainly think this offense is going to have a lot of success moving the ball against this secondary of Texas. The key for me is Texas has got to be able to control the clock and run the ball. If they can't, and there's a pretty good opportunity that a pretty good suspicion that they won't, I do think that Ohio State not only wins this game, but they're going to win it by double digits. So here's what I would suggest. I would look at the Ohio State team total up and over. I would look at the Texas team total to go under. And if you're really feeling frisky, I would even go to the alternate market right now, and I would lay 9.5 or 10 with Ohio State. Just ladder it up. 7, 8, 9, 10. I think this is going to be very ugly for the Texas Longhorns. But we shall see. I still got to play the game. Either way, In-Game Live has got you covered coming up. Game Time Decisions. We'll see you again tomorrow here. Enjoy the games. Good luck. We'll see you again tomorrow.